Wow. So, good morning, everybody. I'm glad to be here. This is about, hey, Dominique. Hi, Michelle. I'm not going to wave hi to everybody I know, because I know probably a bunch of people here. So, I live around about 8 kilometers from here. So maybe I'm the closest from home. I came by bus, actually, because it rained. But anyway, I'm going to talk about that the world is changing. Dennis already mentioned that, and yes, it is changing. It is changing fast, and it will change even faster and faster and faster. And I'm going to try to explain it to you, and I'm going to try to show you that the things you do today, as Dennis mentioned, will be different, or actually the things you do tomorrow will be different from how you do things today. So let me ask you by show of hands, who of you is in an Agile or a Scrum project or whatever, anything Agile? Okay. Who of you is a certified Scrum Master or the other one? Way too many. Anyway, so, okay, let's start then. Okay, this is me. Actually, this should be me. This is me. I'm Sander. I'm basically a dad. I've been writing code since I was 14 or 15. Sure, I could have been in the picture Dennis showed you, because I started programming, I think, in 1984 or 1985, something like that. And I still love it. I'm also sort of an Agile coach, but I try to move companies beyond Agile, try to change the companies I work with. Currently, I'm doing that because I'm a freelance as the chief architect for QB. You might all think, who are QB? Well, QB, they make Tone. You know what Tone is, right? The smart thermostat from Eneco. They make that. And, to adhere with what Dennis said, they collect data, like 1 terabyte per day. And they have all sorts of interesting data about households in the Netherlands. They can actually predict, there's a prediction, by the way, they can actually predict when your boiler will break down. Right? And when to call for maintenance, and they show you that in the app, stuff like that. So they do all sorts of interesting things with data again. So that's QB. Before that, I used to be a CTO for a couple of companies, and I used to work for a small company called Capgemini for about a decade. That's a long time, yes. I traveled the world and saw a lot of things. This is my website, my Twitter tag, blah, 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 etc. Right. So, as I said, the world is changing, right? And it's changing fast. Bob Dylan already mentioned that in 1967 or 8, probably. It was maybe even 64, I don't know. And the times are changing faster and faster. So let's give you some examples. This you all know, right? This is Moore's Law. Who of you has never seen Moore's Law? Good, everybody knows that, right? So it basically says the number of transistors in a dense integrated circuit doubles approximately every 2 years. That means every 2 years, the possibilities we have in doing calculations, storing data, whatever we want to do, doubles. So this is not a linear line. This is actually going up like that, right? So it's much, much steeper. Although some people say Moore's Law doesn't apply anymore, still it goes up all the time. So let's go back in history. If you would order a laptop in 1954, let's say at Amazon or at bol.com, it would look like this, right? This was the size of a decent computer back then, right? When I started programming, they looked a bit like this in the 80s. This is an IBM 8180. IBM is a company that used to be, so for the younger people of you, IBM is a company that used to be big before Microsoft came along, and Microsoft was a company that was big before Google came along. Google was big before Amazon came on, and now we're looking for the next thing, right? So anyway, I started programming on these things. For the younger people, they probably have no clue what these things are, right? They're called floppy drives. Remember that? If you remember that, you might have been just as old as I am, right? I'm old. Now, let's move on a bit. So in 2006, so this allowed us basically to write computer code at our homes all the time, right? I started doing that in Turbo Pascal a long time ago. And then in 2006, a little company called Amazon, they came out with something called EC2. What they basically figured out is that if you have a whole bunch of computers, you can rent that out to other people. Right? And if you rent it out to other people, those other people don't need all these big computers at home. So if you are a bank, who of you works for a bank? Oh, not too many, so I can bash on banks a bit, right? So I worked for banks, and they had like basements full of machinery, right? All these big computers, mainframes, AS400s, whatever you might have, right? And if you now can say, we're going to put these computers somewhere else, at one of the data centers of Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Oracle, IBM, oh, they're still there, right? Whatever, things change. Because that allows people who couldn't do things before, they can now do things, well, basically, big banks need 30,000 people to do. So I'll give you an example of that, right? So something about a bit of disruption. This particular graph here is the fintech landscape in the Netherlands. There's about 430 small companies trying to figure out how to make money in the finance industry. What? Banking software. And they run it in the cloud, not on their own computers, because they don't need these computers anymore, right? So they don't need all that hardware. What if you could do that? How much time do you think it takes to write banking software? The company my girlfriend works at has a team that actually hosts an online bank. One of the guys on a team, a programmer, is writing banking software on his own. It took him about a year, and he's almost done. On his own, right? So you can literally say, you know what? I have 5 developers and a UX designer. I'm going to be a bank. Why not? People do that, right? Like Monzo in the UK or N26 in Germany. They actually do this. They don't have these basements full of machinery, right? And they are now competing against these brick-and-mortar banks that employ thousands of people. Can you still compete? Well, in any market these days, new companies will come into your market and disrupt what you do. They will do it cheaper and faster than you do. Or they will disrupt the business model in total, like Uber did. That will happen in almost any market. You can just wait for it, right? If you're in the energy market, like QB is, you can wait for the fact that somebody will disrupt the market. We don't know in which direction, where it goes, but it will happen. The CEO of ING basically says, well, it's not the startups that we worry about. It's the Amazons and the Googles and the Microsofts and the Apples and the Facebooks that we worry about, because they can do payments as well. What if they decide to become a bank? What if Microsoft decides to become a bank? I'm not sure they will, nor will Amazon probably, but they will supply the software to do that, probably. So anybody can be a bank, right? And other companies come into your market as well. Like, for instance, this one. This is AirAsia. Why would they want to become a payment provider? Well, they can. They do lots of payments on board, right? You have to buy your coffee on board these days in an airplane. I hate that, by the way. I want free coffee on my airplanes. And so they do lots of payments. They sell tickets. Why not become a payment provider? Why not? And that's the point. Almost anybody can enter any market these days. And that's why it's going to change. So if you want to keep up with that, if you need to compete with all these companies, small companies, big companies coming from other industries, you need to change, right? And you all think, oh, we're doing Agile, we're fine. No, you're not. You're not, because you're not going fast enough. And to go fast enough, there's a bunch of things you need to do. And that's what I call welcome to the world of small movable parts. There's basically 4 things you need to take care of. So it's not a lot. It just changes your whole culture of your company. But anyway, it's just 4 small things. You need to start thinking in products instead of in projects. Who of you is in a project with a deadline and stuff like that? Probably most of you. Nobody dares to say that now. I know. Don't worry. And the problem is, projects don't work in this industry. In the industry of software development, I've been in these projects for like 30 years. Almost all of them failed, right? Has anybody of you been in a project that met its original deadline, stayed within budget, and delivered everything that was originally promised? Nobody, right? That's our industry. The whole thing is, this stupid metaphor doesn't really work. So we should stop doing that. And the next thing is, we are going to move into even shorter cycles. If you're now on 2-week iterations, sprints, or whatever you might call them, they'll be shorter. Because shorter is better. That means the feedback loop shortens, right? And that means we can produce features faster and faster and faster as we need to. And the next thing is, we're going to work in even smaller teams. If you think a typical Scrum team is small, that will change too. That will be my guess, right? And that will be the majority of this particular talk. And we're going to talk about even smaller components, although usually I have way too much material with me, so I'm probably skip that, but this is something that's going to be addressed in the rest of the day anyway, right? So let's start with the first one. This is the Cynefin model. or the Cynefin framework, actually. Who of you has seen that? Okay, let me explain a bit to you. So it starts off in what is called the obvious zone. This is my nice pointer. It's cool, right? And in the obvious zone, you could say, okay, if there is a problem, there is a best solution. There is one solution that will solve this problem. Well, what you do, you apply that particular solution. This is very linear, right? You can do this even in a waterfall project. If we have problem A, here's the solution, apply it, done. Even if it takes half a year, doesn't matter. You know what the best solution. There's only one solution. That's easy problems. And then you get into what is called the complicated zone, or the complicated context. Here, you might have a problem, and there might be a whole bunch of possible solutions. Let's say you have to deal with authorization, authentication. There's lots of different ways of solving this. You can build it yourself. You can go to Microsoft. You can go to Amazon. You can go to any third-party provider and implement that and stick it into your system or into your landscape. So there's many solutions. That means if there's many possible solutions that you know of, you have to choose. And you have to think about it. This is where usually projects are. Like people hire a bunch of analysts, and they start thinking about the problem, and once they've found the solution that is best applicable for this particular situation, you go off and build it, and you test it, and you run it, done. It's still sort of linear. The problem is, most companies and most parts of companies think that they are here. Well, they are not. We are largely in what is called the complex context. In the complex context, what happens is, you might know where you want to be. Let's say you figure out where you want to be in 3 years' time. You have a mission or a purpose or a why, if you believe in Simon Sinek's golden circle metaphor. You know where you want to go, but you have no clue how to get there, right? This is typical what we do. Because between now and 3 years' time, everything will have changed. It does all the time, right? That means the only thing you can do is, if you know where you want to go, take one small step. See if that works. See if it brings you slightly closer to where you want to be. Take the next step. If it doesn't work, you change direction a bit. And if you change direction a bit, well, you try something new out. If that works, okay, you can continue. If it doesn't work, take a different direction. And eventually, you might even change your goal, where you want to be. This is where we have been in software development all the time. Because, as I showed you, everything changes all the time. Technology changes all the time. If you go out into the sessions in the rest of the day, they will show all sorts of technology that you might think of, what? I've never seen this before. It happens to me all the time, right? Every time I go into a room at a conference and I listen to a talk, I'm thinking, oh, I didn't know that. It happens all the time, right? You're surprised all the time in this industry. That's what makes it such a fun industry, by the way. But we are usually in the complex context. In the complex context, projects don't work, right? And it can be even worse. You could be in a chaotic context. In a chaotic context, you don't even know where you want to go. If you go to upper management in your company and say, so, what's our mission? Where do we want to be in 3 years' time? And they're like that, right? You have no direction. Or if the CEO of your company says, yes, I want to have success. And then it happens, right? And then you say, so what does that mean to you, success? Well, I don't know. I just want to have success. Does that mean you want to make loads of money? No, that's not. I just want to have success. If you're there, you're in the chaotic zone. You don't know where to go. And usually what happens is you start running around in circles and you get nowhere. The thing is, if you are here, please make sure that you find some direction and go to the complex zone. That's the best thing you can do. So if you are in a chaotic context, there's two things you can do. Go to upper management and say, you need to find direction, or you can say, I quit. Some of the guys here in the room I know did that in such company, and anyway, so that's the story. So that means projects, as in traditional, right, with you have the iron triangle in place, you need to set your timeline and how much the project will cost and how many people do you need and what are the requirements. It doesn't work. So stop doing that. If you're in a project that has a detailed planning, leave. Right? So the only thing you can do, if you are in a complex context or in a chaotic context, which most of you will be, is actually say, okay, here's the dot at the horizon. This is where we want to be, where we are going, and take one step at a time. You can at best have a roadmap saying, okay, these are probably the things that we want to do. But it might change in a year's time, right? If you've done the first 10 items of your roadmap, it might have changed. You need to throw the rest out and pull new items in. That's basically how software development should work. And you build on products, not in projects, right? So, this is the message. Please make clear you have this in your head. Projects do not work in our industry, right? Unless you are building, I don't know what, the telephone list of the employees in an Excel spreadsheet for the receptionist, that's okay, you can do that. So, what's the next step? Well, the next step is shorter cycles. And the problem with shorter cycles is that one of the things that we are stuck at in this industry, and I just spoken to Marcel, I don't know where Marcel is, but he's somewhere in the room probably, and he said, I'm at a company where things get sort of stuck. And the reason a lot of these companies get stuck, and this was a nice example, is that basically we have lowered our fences. Now, does anybody of you do karate or judo or jiu-jitsu or whatever? So for any of you who does that, right? Like, for instance, you're the karate kid. How long does it take you to become a master at karate or jiu-jitsu or whatever? How long does that take? 20 years, right? I've asked my girlfriend. She basically is one. She used to be Dutch champion in karate. She said, well, it took me 10 years of rigorous training to become a Dutch champion, to be at that level. Now, next question. To become a master in Scrum, how long does that take? 10,000. No, 10,000 hours. That would be the right question. So, the right answer. But you can do training courses. They take you 2 days. You don't even have to do that. Just read the stupid Scrum guide. It's not stupid. It's the anyway. So, and you do a multiple choice exam of about 30 questions. And if you get the majority right, you're a Scrum master. Right? Now, in the past 20 years, I've been doing Agile for at least 20 years now, I've seen people come into the industry with this certificate, certified or professional Scrum Master, whatever you want, go into projects and try to change things and solve things, right? Now, what happens there is that people will do this. They will apply everything that Agile and Scrum that they learn from the Scrum Guide, from the 2-day training course, in a very dogmatic way. I'll read it to you, right? It says, a dogma, so Scrum, is the established belief or doctrine held by a religion, scrum.org, or a particular group or organization, your company. It is authoritative and not to be disputed, doubted, or diverged from by its practitioners. Right? So you do exactly what the Scrum Guide says. So who of you does user stories? They're not in the Scrum Guide. Who of you has a project plan? It's not in the Scrum Guide. Who of you has a project manager in their project? They're not in the Scrum Guide, right? So you're not allowed to do that, right? And I've been debating with Scrum Masters around the world for a long time about this. Now, let me give you a nice example. If you do, well, and it's not particularly to bash Scrum, it's just that don't do this in a very dogmatic way. That's the message, basically. So if you look at this burn down chart, it's from a project in Belgium. I'm not going to say which one. It's a long time ago. See, it's 2013. And you can look up on my LinkedIn profile where I worked in 2013 and figure it out, right? No. I never work in Belgium. Anyway, so this is basically people estimating the amount of work that goes into a sprint, and then they do the work. And if you look at the black line, this is what is expected, sort of, right? Now, in the end of the sprint, they had some work left. People call this a failing sprint. I don't know why. Failing sprints do actually not exist, right? There's not such a thing, but you commit to a bunch of work to do, right? That means you have to estimate it right, and then you have to do all this work, and it has to be finished exactly, and then still have a useful meaning to the customer too. Because you build a potentially shippable product increment. That's a horrible phrase, by the way. So the next sprint, they had this, and the sprint after, they had this, and then this, and then this, and then this. So for 6 months in this project, they failed their sprints. Now, the project manager on this project got really angry. He fired him. It's really true. And then he said, well, you're not able to do the work. You don't estimate right. You're stupid. So he hired a bunch of developers from India. So not... This is a true story, by the way. And they failed too. And the project manager figured out that anybody was stupid, and eventually he was fired, and the whole project backfired and stuff like that. So having these sprints might not be a good solution. And the whole thing is, if you look at the Agile Manifesto does not talk about sprints or 2-week periods or 3-week periods or 4-week or whatever you do. It talks about continuously adding value. And that is what we are supposed to do. We are supposed to continuously add value to whatever you do. That's it, right? That means you can just stop sprinting. Doesn't add value. If it doesn't add value, change it, even if it is in the Scrum Guide. So, you should probably move towards, or you could, let's not do it nicely, right? You could move to a continuous flow. And saying, oh, I've just a bunch of items on my backlog, and I'll start doing one, and when it's finished, it's on the right side of this thing. By the way, this slide doesn't mean use Jira. It means move items from left to right and finish them as fast as possible. And some of you might think, yes, but this is just Kanban, right? I anticipated that. There's actually a game called Kanban, a board game. Cool, right? Anyway, so if you do that, you need to, and you want to add value continuously in as fast as possible. That means you have to automate everything. You automate your pipelines. You even automate how you get to your pipelines. You automate all your tests, integration tests, unit tests, acceptance tests, whatever you do, automate everything. This is, by the way, Jenkins pipeline. That doesn't mean use Jenkins. It means there are pipelines. And these are much longer, and everything needs to be automated than you would usually expect. Like, for instance, if you have tests, like this is a repository of 3K lines of code. It has 342 unit tests, right? That's a lot. Still, it was one of our most important components that we built, actually. So you have to automate everything. And if you do that, you can deliver value continuously. You could go into production within 5 minutes. You know what's the world record in going into production times per day? Over 7,000 times. It's like 7,487 or something like that. It's at Amazon, by the way, but so they ship software at an enormous pace. And you too can go faster than you can now, right? Do that. And by the way, if you do that, you can stop doing projects. So, what's next? I'm going to talk about teams, right? Because that's the main subject for today. And when I talk about teams, I have to talk about what I these days call traditional Agile. I started doing Agile in the mid-late 90s, started figuring out how to do things iteratively and incrementally and work on that and improve on that. And then Scrum came along and XP came along and later Kanban came along and DSDM sort of vanished and all sort of things changed, right? But the thing is, if you look at current day issues we have in 2019, where are we? Anyway, so that's the year, right? I look like my dad. I don't even know what year it is. Anyway, so, and these traditional Agile approaches that I was showing you earlier, they don't solve these modern day issues. So I'm going to show you these modern day issues. Of course, I started counting at 0. So this is issue 0. This is my 19-year-old son, Spike. This is about autonomy, right? He used to study in Amsterdam at the university, did a study of economy, politics, and philosophy. Nice study. And after a month, he said, Dad, I'm going to quit. I said, okay, why? He said, I want to become a professional drummer. He's 19, right? And I'm like, dude, good choice. Anything better than studying economy, right? But anyway, so, and I said, well, you have to do what you see best. It's your life, right? This is about autonomy. Autonomy is really hard to give. As a parent, you would want him to finish a study that he can earn money later. So I sort of tried to push him into computer science. He didn't want to do that. So music is a good alternative. But he has to follow his path. It's his life. And now he's studying to become a professional drummer. He's made demos. They're on YouTube, actually. And he now wants to go to a conservatory. That's really, really cool. And the only thing I can do is let him go, right? Just like the song. Let it go. No. I can't sing. So, but this is really, really hard, right? Because for most people, being autonomous and self-organized, for most teams, this is really, really out of their comfort zone. If I tell teams they are autonomous and they can self-organize, you know what they ask me first thing? What do you want us to do? I'm like, figure it out. It's your life, right? Go play drums. Oh no, this is a team, right? So, well, they could be a band, right? Anyway, but this is so hard. And I cannot explain to teams how to be self-organized, how to be autonomous. It's like drawing an owl. I can say, there's 2 circles and the rest you have to figure out yourselves. Go off and do that. Now, lots of companies I see these days, they overdo it. This is at Zappos. This is not in the Netherlands, right? You think this doesn't happen in the Netherlands? You're wrong. This picture is at a large retailer in the Netherlands. This is my girlfriend's leg at an interview at that particular company for a high-level IT function. She's in a glass room that is filled with bowls up to her. This is not the IKEA, by the way. I said to her, I wouldn't want to work here, basically. Although it's a nice company and they do cool things. I'm not, well, anyway, so this is too much, right? And the thing is, what I discovered over the years is that one thing that works is to have fewer rules, right? With my kids, what I do is I usually ask myself, if they want something or they don't want something, I'm like, the first question I ask myself is, why should I say no? If there's a good argument to say no, I'll say no. Other than that, they're okay. If you want to play drums, fine. If you don't want to help me, if you don't want me to help you with math, okay. I know a bit about it, but you're in 2nd year of high school, so if you know better, do it, right? And he does. He doesn't allow me to help him. Anyway, so the thing is, if you have less rules, stuff might go better. Because if you have less rules, what you need to do is continuously think about what you do and how you do it and with whom you're doing it. This is a nice example. I was in Indonesia last year for a conference, and I took some days off, and I went to the jungle. And to get into the jungle, I needed to pass through this really big city. I'm in a car. I'm filming this, actually. Now, if you look in the streets, you see all the traffic lights, right? And all the signs and the posts and the lines on the road and whatever. And we're going to try to cross across from this crossroads here. Look at all the signs and all the rules that are in place, right? Even look at the stoplight. It has like, you can see it in a second, both red and green are on. This is a city of 2.3 million people. There's not a single sign in the whole city. At least I couldn't find one. Traffic is going everywhere. Still, there's not like 1,000 people getting killed every day. Only a few. But it's a big city, right? So anyway, what happens here is I looked at the taxi driver and he was continuously paying attention to anybody else on the crossroads. Now, I'm going to show you a picture of the crossroads. It's about 8 kilometers from here. It's across from where I live. It's full of left traffic lights. It's full of signs. It's full of lines on the road. There's so many rules. And what happens if there's so many rules? People stop thinking. They think, oh, the light is green. I can just pass. These days, it's more dangerous to actually go through a green light than it is to go through a red light. Because if you go through a red light, at least you pay attention. There's actually been research being done, right? So the thing is, with less rules, autonomy becomes easier because people need to think for themselves how to collaborate and how to work and how to do things and how to solve their issues, right? It's what they do. So the next problem is 9 to 5. Why? So everybody here in the room probably goes to work at around 8:30, 9, right? Well, most of you do probably, right? Why? So yeah, take care. Yeah, that's a good reason. So this is a picture I took on the A2 while standing still in traffic. I looked to the other side of the road. People were standing still to the other side as well. I was going to Amsterdam. Other people were going to Utrecht. And we're all standing still on the highway. What's the point? Why do we do this? You know what we do is we go to work at 8:39. We get stuck in traffic. It takes us an hour to get to Amsterdam. Even if without traffic it would take me 25 minutes. I get to my desk, and what do? I start reading my email, right? Most people do that. Or they start with a stand-up meeting or whatever useless things you do, right? And you could just stay at home. If 20% of the people wouldn't go into traffic at 8:30, but at 9:30, we wouldn't have far less traffic accidents, far less traffic jams than we now have. So I started thinking about go into work a little bit later. And it kind of works. Well, not for the whole traffic problem in the Netherlands, but at least for my problems. So we need to change this as well, right? And the next thing is, programming has become complicated. When I started writing code, it was in Turbo Pascal. I had a black screen with green characters on it. That was it. There was no database. I never heard of a database. I just wrote to the file system, whatever I did, etc. That was it. Easy stuff, right? And now, if you look at how complex software development is, it's becoming too complex. We cannot do that on our own anymore. Edsger Dijkstra already said that in 86. He said, the programmer has to be able to think in terms of conceptual hierarchies that are much deeper than a single mind ever needed to do before. He basically said in this talk, he said, software development has become the most complex thing on earth. And we are doing that, right? That means we are extremely smart. It also means we cannot do that on our own anymore. There's no way around this, right? And we have to change things. Also, we don't think from 9 to 5 to combine the two previous ones. This is how our thoughts work, like the blue line. I get up, I have some ideas. I want to switch on my laptop and put them in code. Or maybe late at night, even when I'm already sleeping, I wake up and I'm thinking, yes, this is how I should solve it. You need to get up at your laptop, type, go on again, right? It doesn't work from 9 to 5 with a lunch break in between. That's now not how our mind works. And we need to collaborate, right? Next issue is, there's not enough of us. That's kind of weird standing for a full room of software developers, right? But there's not enough. If you look at the numbers are terrible. It is zeer krap. And this is the source, right? It's the Dutch Social Security Agency, UWV. There's not enough of us. There's more and more people coming into this industry, and it's still not enough. It will never be enough, right? And that means when you think about roles, like you're a developer, you're a front-end developer, you're a back-end developer, you're a server-side developer, you're a whatever you do, change that. Lose those roles. It's not important whether you are a tester and only do test jobs or whether you are a back-end developer and don't want to do front-end. You will do everything because we basically are becoming what is called T-shaped. Now, in this T-shaped world, there's probably a few things or one thing or whatever you call it that you are good at. It's your sweet spot. And there's lots of other things you can do. I know a little bit about Jenkins. I know a little bit about cloud. I know a little bit about Lambda. I know a bit about, well, lots of stuff. That means if I can combine it with somebody else who also knows something about it, we double our effort. We can do more. That means lose the roles. You're not a developer. You're a person in a team that helps create value for the customer. That's what you do, in what way. Whether you need to figure out how to configure a Lambda on AWS or a function on Azure, do it. It's part of what you do. And that goes for everybody in the whole team, right? So this stuff changes as well. And also, it's he's in the room, right? The guy with the blue shirt, Dominique. And communication is hard. We know that as developers. We know that, right? Talking to people is a hard thing. We don't find it easy, but we do it all day. If I look at the companies I work for, I can literally be in meetings the whole fucking day. I don't want to be in meetings the whole day. I want to keep them as short as possible. We are over-communicating, basically. And the thing is, we shouldn't strive for more communication. We should strive for better communication, easier communication. That doesn't mean put everything in Jira and wait until your ticket pops up. It means if you are communicating in a team of 10 people, there's a whole bunch of possibilities of communicating. If you work in very small teams, let's say 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 people, communication is easier. And we need to go there, right? So as my girlfriend said, you don't need more communication, you need better communication. So for instance, these stupid day-long refinement sessions that some companies have, stop doing that. It doesn't add value to sit with 12 people in a room and discuss the items you're not going to do anyway. Don't do that, right? Do it with the 2-3 persons who are actually working on that particular item. And only at the point in time that they start working on it, not at the start of your sprint or whatever you call it. So stop doing that. Also, you know this, right? Another issue is we suck at estimation. It's never been better. And it's not going to improve because technology is continuously changing. That means if we have to estimate something we don't know yet, we can't estimate it. And that's been happening in this industry for a long, long time. And it won't stop there. And I'll show you that you even don't need to do that. All these low-level estimates that people do, trying to break stuff, stories into tasks, estimate the task, see if it all fits your sprint, stop doing that. There is no value in that. And I can even prove it, because there's a thing called the law of large numbers. I'll read it to you. It's a theorem that describes the result of performing the same experiment a large number of times. According to the law, the average of the result obtained from a large number of trials should be close to the expected value. Now, to translate that a bit for you, it means that if you're doing planning poker or t-shirt sizing, let's say you have a scale from 1 to 5. If you estimate 100 items on a scale from 1 to 5, what will be the average result? 3. Don't say 2.5. It's 3, right? And it will always be 3. And if the number of experiments you take, so the number of items you estimate grows, you will get even closer to that expected value. So low-level estimates in software development do not add value. You might as well count the items you work on. It's much easier, saves lots of time. And by the way, if you're not doing sprints anyway, you don't need to fill up your sprint with work. Stop doing that. It's inefficient, so stop doing this. Also, I talked about these red sprint, these fading sprints, right? So that means, in my opinion, if you're up for it, lose sprints. Just work on items that come from your backlog or your roadmap, do them one by one, build the features, put them into production, do the next one. Continuously work like that. That's it, basically. That's all the process you need. Next problem. So what's the next problem? As I said, it's becoming way too complex. If you look at an average team of like 7 people, a typical Scrum team, and you look at all the skills you need to be able to build software into production, it's too much. Again, that means that these small teams, these 7-people teams on average in a Scrum environments, like 6 plus or minus 3 or whatever, so that's sort of like the guideline for that, right? It doesn't work because there's lots of skills you don't have in that team. So either you need to enlarge the team or realize that you don't have all the skills on your team, right? So where do you go? Well, the thing is, with every work item you pick from the backlog, with every story, every feature, whatever you do, you need a different subset of skills, right? To configure a function on Azure takes different skills than to build a web page, than to build a mobile, whatever you do, or to build a backend function or a microservice or to test something. So there's lots of different skills depending on which items you take off the backlog. And you could just say, what if for any item we pick from the backlog, we just pick the skills we need from that from a larger group? And that's the direction I want to go to. So it's a difference from item to item, right? And then you might conclude that these traditional Agile frameworks, such as Scrum, so I'm not going to say Scrum is worthless. It isn't, because it gives you a nice vocabulary to reason about. There's lots of phrases in there, lots of things in there that are really useful. But you also need to think outside of that box. And when people say, oh, does it scale? I couldn't care less, basically. Agile was never meant to scale, right? So if you are in, let's say you're doing this. Is anybody of you in a company that tries to do this? Oh, go out. This has nothing to do with being Agile. This makes stuff more complex. Any Agile transformation I see using such a framework, such a big framework, what people are doing in the organization, they are mostly wondering about what their role will be named when you move to SAFe. This has nothing to do with becoming more Agile. This is just making, well, it's making money for some people, that is. But I would say, get out of here, right? Also, there's probably some of you who are implementing the Spotify model, right? You are, right? And if you are doing this, the problem here is the Spotify model was written down by Spotify, and the version you're reading is the version from 2014. It's 5 years old. It has changed. They change because they change all the time. It was a snapshot of how they did things in 2014. So if you are trying to implement their snapshot in 2014, that means, first of all, that you are probably figuring out that you are like Spotify in 2014. You're probably not, right? You're different. It also means all the new things that they came up with, you don't have. So you're implementing something that's 5 years old, was meant for a particular company, which is not you. That means don't do this. So I'm not saying the model is bad, because I really like it. It's a really nice model. But unless you are a typical company that is like Spotify, this probably doesn't really exactly fit your company. Or you can try to make your company fit Spotify. It doesn't. It's a double growth industry leading company, which if you are just here around the corner here, you're probably not, right? So unless you are working for Spotify, of course. By the way, Spotify doesn't work like this anymore. They changed over time because they learned. It means you have to figure out what your own way is of doing this. And it also means stop doing projects. Now, there's one thing I'd like to touch on, and that is basically, let's go back to the Cynefin model, right? We're in the complex zone. That means we can set a dot at the horizon and go from there. Take experiments, do item by item. How do you work on that, given the fact that we have all these new interesting issues? Well, there's lots of things you can do. First of all, you set a mission. This is the mission I found at QB in the hallway. It's just stuck on the wall. And this is something you could strive for. That means everything you do should focus towards achieving this. And if your goals change, put it on the wall again and change direction again. That's all you need to do. And that means, of all your products, what you can do is, you can split them up into what I call areas, but you can use bounded context as well. So split them up, and for each of these groups of products or product lines or whatever you call them, have a team that is dedicated to that, to delivering value in that particular stream. And using the bounded context pattern, make sure that all these streams are independent of each other. That means they can add value to your products without having to touch the other teams, because dependencies make you slow. Right? And then you need to, well, I'm going to skip this bit. It's nice animation. I made this yesterday, but it's too much. So for now, was cool animation, right? So that brings me to how you can organize this. So it's just one pattern. It's a pattern I've came up with for a couple of years ago, and I've tried to experiment with that in companies I work with. And it's basically called collectives. It's named after a big band called the New Cool Collective. The thing is, if you have a whole collective of skills, instead of saying I have 7 roles on my team, but a whole collection of skills, you can say for each item we do, in this case, each song they play, they can pick some, no, not arbitrary, but some people from the orchestra to play a particular song. So if I have a singer and a piano and guitar player, I can do a ballad. Or if I have a bunch of horn blowers with it, I can do, I don't know, maybe a soul song or some jazz piece, right? So I can change it from item to item that I work on. But the collective is still as a whole. So traditional teams in Waterfall, traditional project, they're separated by the disciplines or the roles they have, right? So the architects are on floor 14, the developers are on floor 2, the testers are on floor 1, and the operations guys are usually in the basement, because that's where the iron is, right? In Agile, we changed that. We moved to multi-disciplinary teams, and that's a lot better, because it allows you to work with the other roles, but still, we think in roles. And what I would like to do is say, okay, we have a collection of people with skills. I don't care about roles. It doesn't really matter, right? It only matters for your annual review, because you're a junior developer, a media developer, a senior developer, or an architect, which means you don't code anymore, which means your salary should lower. And anyway, but it's about these skills, right? And these skills matter. So you can organize that by saying, okay, I have this collective of people, a collective of skills, and I have a roadmap that sort of tries to focus towards the goal that we have. And then there's the last step in the model. It says, basically, start using very small teams. Teams of 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 people that pick up an item from your roadmap, your backlog, or whatever you call it, for this particular, well, in QB they call it value streams, I call it areas. So where you want to add value as fast as possible, and you just pick the items up. You just pick an item, and then somebody says, usually at a stand-up meeting, says, oh, you know what, I'm done with my current item, I'm going to pick up a new one. And then somebody else might say, oh, you know what, I want to know something about that too, or I know a little bit about that, so I'll help you out. They form a new team, they work on the item, they do the design, the 2 of them, the 3 of them. And they can do it offline. They don't have to be in the office the whole day, right? If they decide to go to a bar to do the work, that's fine too. If they decide to go at home and do the work there, I'm happy with that. Cool. Just do the work. And after they've done that, they disband and you start again, right? That means it's a sort of a dynamic flow from one work item to the next. There's a work item come up, somebody figures out what to do, somebody else says, I come and help you, and it changes every time again and again and again. So it's a sort of a dynamic change, and nobody has to take care of it. It's autonomous, right? We all know how to do this ourselves. There's no manager involved in doing this. This is just it. So I'll give you some examples, and then I'll wrap up. So here's a bunch of developers and a tester. The developers are sitting, the tester is standing, of course. Or here's an architect. He's praying, right, to see if his code works. And a developer. So stuff like that. And it helps all the time. And the reason it works is because leadership in how you do stuff and what you do is contextual. It means you're responsible for that work item. That means you deliver it, whatever it takes. It also means that you have less communication because it's just the two of you. Okay, and once every day you have to go to the stand-up meeting. You broaden your skills really, really fast because you work with different people and having different skills almost every day. This is a nice model. I'm not saying you have to do this. It's a model you should, or you could do, I should say, right? And then, if you figure that out, you can literally stop doing projects. So let me wrap it up in just about 1 minute. It's statically energy. So, in retrospective, you have to do a retro, right? So, the thing is, we are mostly in the complex context. That means the things around us change all the time. Basically, we, as the tech people, we change it all the time, right? It's basically our own fault that we are here. And that means you have to take care of that. You have to deal with the fact that you are in a complex context. You cannot do linear software development anymore. Even traditional Agile doesn't meet all the requirements that we have these days on how to write software. It means that you need to change. And if you think, oh, change is hard, I'm just a developer, I have no influence on that. You know what? Everybody can be that change. You can be that change. Because if you are the one who is starting to change, people will follow if it's for the better. By the way, I tried this out last week at a parking lot, actually. It works. So yes, that's cool, right? And the thing is, even if most of us look like this a bit, we are actually the ones who make the world change. Because basically, nerds are the new sexy, right? We can make the change. We are the change. And if you do that, you can do stop projects. I think I'm about through, right? That's it. I'll be here for the rest of the day, as long as there's beer. These are if you have any other questions later on, or QB is hiring, by the way. So thank you all for being here, and I hope you have a very great day.